When Kim Woo-bin fought cancer, the moment that shattered Shin Min-a's strength. What truly happened behind the closed doors of two stars whose love seemed unbreakable? The world saw their smiles, but few knew the storm they faced together. The pain, the silence, the strength tested to its limits. It's time to uncover the truth. Let's find out together, right now. With red carpet revealed, the lights on the set flickered one last time before they went dark. And for the first time in years, Kim Woo-bin didn't feel the thrill of the camera. Instead, there was only the sharp sting in his throat, a pain so small, so silent, that it almost seemed unworthy of attention. But it was there, growing, like a shadow that refused to fade. The staff laughed around him. The director called for another take. And Woo-bin smiled, that famous, effortless smile that could melt through screens. No one noticed the tremor in his hand when he reached for the water bottle. No one saw the exhaustion hiding behind his calm, sculpted face. Outside, fans screamed his name. Inside, his body was quietly betraying him. The world of fame. Pain is not supposed to exist. Cameras demand perfection. And perfection cannot cough, cannot falter, cannot bleed. Kim Woo-bin knew that better than anyone. For years he had risen through the ranks, from modeling runways to box office leads. The man of every brand. The dream of every young heart. He carried the weight of expectation like a second skin, never cracking, never slowing. And by his side, Shin Min-a, elegance itself. Their love, when revealed, seemed to confirm the myth that even stars could love perfectly. But that night, in the quiet after filming, he coughed again, and this time, there was blood. He told no one. Not yet. In show business, rumors spread faster than illness. And fear can kill a career long before disease kills the body. Woo-bin went home, washed his face, looked at his reflection, still handsome, still radiant, and whispered to himself, it's nothing. The lie echoed softly in the bathroom tiles. It would be the last time he'd ever believe it. Weeks passed. His voice grew hoarse. Strength waned. And the once unstoppable energy that powered every scene began to flicker. Shin Min-a noticed first, she always did. She noticed the way his laugh shortened. The way he leaned against walls after long takes. The way his eyes seemed to retreat somewhere unreachable. When she finally asked, "Are you okay?" he smiled again, the smile that had fooled the world. "Just tired," he said. But love has a way of seeing through performance. When he collapsed in the dressing room, she was there before anyone else. Holding his face, calling his name. Ambulance siren wailed through the soul night, slicing the illusion clean in two. The diagnosis came like thunder, nasopharyngeal cancer. Rare. Aggressive. Dangerous. Doctor's words hung in the air between them like shards of glass. For a moment, neither moved. Shin Min-a's fingers went cold. Woo-bin stared at the floor. The man who had faced the camera without fear could not look at his own reflection now. We caught it early, the doctor added. But the word cancer had already hollowed the room. When the news finally reached his agency, everything stopped. Meetings were cancelled, schedules erased. His last commercial shoot, a luxury watch ad, was shelved indefinitely. There was no statement. No press release. Only silence. And in that silence, they disappeared. For months, no one saw Kim Woo-bin or Shin Min-a. The once omnipresent couple who graced magazines and red carpets vanished without a trace. Fans speculated wildly, a breakup? A secret project abroad? But those who knew whispered only one word, illness. In a small apartment away from Seoul's chaos, Shin Min-a sat beside his hospital bed every night. She read scripts aloud to him, though he could barely respond. Some nights, she read love stories, other nights, nothing at all, just silence. Their fingers entwined. Woo-bin, once the icon of youthful energy, now moved slowly. His body weakened by treatments that stole not only his strength but his identity. Chemotherapy blurred his vision. Radiation burned his throat. Mirror in the room became an enemy. But even then, she never left. When his hair began to fall, she smiled and told him, "You look even better." When he winced in pain, she squeezed his hand harder, as if willing her strength into his veins. Yet at night, when he finally fell asleep, she would slip into the hallway and cry, quietly, desperately, unseen. The media's silence didn't last forever. Paparazzi thrive on absence. And when stars vanish, Absence becomes news. Articles began to surface. Where is Kim Woo-bin? Shin Min-ah's secret life away from the screen. Some fans defended them, others speculated betrayal, marriage, scandal. Shin Min-ah ignored them all. Her world had narrowed to one fragile heartbeat beside her. In the sterile white of the hospital, Woo-bin began to lose the concept of time. Days bled into nights. The fame he once carried like armor dissolved into something distant, unreal. He was no longer actor Kim Woo-bin, he was simply a man fighting to breathe. There were moments when he wanted to give up. When the pain clawed through his skull. When the taste of metal filled his mouth. When even breathing felt like a punishment. But every time his will began to fade, she was there. Sometimes she said nothing, just sat beside him. Steady. In those moments, she was the only reason he stayed. Outside, the world kept moving, dramas aired, awards were given. Red carpets rolled on. Inside, time stood still. Love became both a sanctuary and a burden. Shin Min-ah learned to smile for his sake. To pretend she wasn't terrified. But inside, a woman known for grace and composure was breaking in ways no one would ever see. Their friends visited occasionally, actors, directors, fellow models, but even they left speechless. Once charismatic man they knew was now pale, trembling, almost translucent. Still, when they said goodbye, he smiled again. Always that same, unyielding smile. The irony was cruel. The smile that once made him famous was now the mask hiding his suffering. Months turned into a year. Treatment after treatment. Injection after injection. Shin Min-ah's career quietly paused, offers were declined. Interviews cancelled. Management understood but never pried. She lived between hospital quarters and home. Her life reduced to quiet rituals, making soup he could swallow. Adjusting his blanket. Whispering that everything would be okay. Even when she no longer believed it. And yet, something miraculous began to stir. Slowly. Almost imperceptibly. The color returned to his face. His voice, though faint, began to strengthen. The doctors called it progress. She called it hope. One winter morning, as the snow fell outside the hospital window, Woo-bin looked at her and mouthed the words, "Thank you." It was barely audible. But it was everything. Still, recovery was not victory. The shadow lingered, fear that the cancer might return. Fear that fame might feel empty after everything they'd endured. They lived quietly, cherishing the mundane, morning walks, coffee without cameras, laughter without microphones. But the world does not forget easily. When his illness became public, not through scandal, through an official statement, the internet erupted. Messages poured in by the thousands, prayers, memories, pleas for strength. For the first time, Woo-bin saw how deeply he had touched people. Behind every message of hope was a reminder of how fragile everything was. He remained out of sight for years, rebuilding piece by piece. Shin Min-ah became both guardian and ghost, rarely seen, all was there. They turned down public appearances, focusing instead on quiet healing. When journalists caught glimpses of them together, walking hand in hand through a side street, the images went viral. But even then, their expressions remained calm, two people who had survived a war invisible to everyone else. By the time the cameras found him again, he was different. The jawline was still sharp, the eyes still magnetic. But there was a new gravity in his gaze, the kind that only comes from pain endured in silence. Reporters called it maturity, called it survival. And yet, beneath that survival was something unspoken, the part of Shin Min-ah that had broken along the way. The endless nights of watching someone you love fade and return. The terror that any cough, any ache, might bring the nightmare back. She never complained, never faltered publicly. Those who knew her said her laughter changed, softer now, tinged with melancholy. In a rare interview, when asked how she stayed strong, she answered simply, "You don't stay strong. You just don't fall apart." That was the truth, raw and unpolished. Strength was not a choice, it was an instinct born from fear of losing him. Though he survived, something inside her never fully recovered. As Woo-bin prepared for his first tentative return to acting, Shin Min-ah watched quietly from behind the scenes. He rehearsed lines, smiled for cameras, signed autographs. The world celebrated his comeback, hailing him as a symbol of courage. He knew the cost. Every triumphant smile was built on nights of suffering no one had witnessed. The applause was loud, but behind it, Trembled, not from pride, but from memory. That was the paradox of love under the spotlight. The world sees the glow, never the burn. The first time he stepped back in front of the camera, air in the studio felt heavier than before. The lights were the same, white, merciless. But something about them seemed softer, as if the world itself had learned to breathe with him. Woo Bin stood in silence, surrounded by crew members who pretended not to stare. The script lay trembling in his hands. But it wasn't fear that made them shake. It was the memory of everything those lights had once taken from him. The director called his name. Slowly, inhaled. And when the camera began to roll, he didn't act. He simply existed. The lens caught the faintest glimmer of fragility in his eyes, and for once, it wasn't edited out. Shin Min-ar waited in the car. She told him she wouldn't come inside, said it would make him more nervous. But the truth was, she couldn't bear to see him under those lights again. Last time she had watched him perform, she didn't know that he was dying inside. The memory had rooted itself deep within her. No amount of time could erase it. So she sat quietly in the parking lot, hands clasped together, listening to the rhythm of her heartbeat against the quiet hum of the city. Every passing second felt like a test. When he finally emerged, hours later, he was smiling. Not the polished smile the world adored, but a small, quiet one, human. Real. It went well, he said. She smiled back, but her eyes glistened. I know, she whispered. They drove home in silence. The radio played a love song. One of those melodies that pretends to heal you while tearing something open inside. Woo Bin reached over and took her hand. No words were needed, both of them knew that this moment, this normal, unremarkable drive, was a miracle. The months that followed were slow and deliberate. The world embraced his return with tenderness, fans sent letters. Strangers cried at his commercials. And every interview turned into a love letter to resilience. Yet behind the curtain of public admiration, the real struggle continued. He still woke in the middle of the night with pain in his throat. She still jolted awake at every sound, fearing it was him gasping for air. Recovery, they learned, was not an ending, it was a lifelong act of courage. Their home became a sanctuary of silence and small joys. Morning tea instead of a coffee. Laughter over burnt toast. Movies at midnight with the lights off. Fame had once demanded the perfection, now, they built a life around imperfection. Min-ar returned to acting slowly, cautiously. Her face thinner but her gaze deeper. Critics called her new performances hauntingly mature. They didn't know why. Sometimes, Woo Bin would visit her on set. Stand in the shadows, watching her transform. Filled with a quiet awe. There was a tenderness in the way he looked at her, as though he knew that while he had fought death, she had fought despair. Cameras stopped rolling. She'd walk toward him, exhausted but smiling, and he'd whisper, "You were incredible." Those words, simple and unadorned, were more precious to her than any award. Still, the shadows never vanished completely. Sleeves a mark no light can erase. There were days when he felt weak again. Dizziness struck without warning. When old fears whispered through his veins. On those days, she would cook soup, sit beside him, tell stories about the world outside, the weather, the gossip, the sound of the city. Sometimes she'd read to him again, just like before. And he would listen, eyes half closed. Not to the words but to her voice, the one constant that had carried him through everything. Years passed, and life, cautious at first, began to feel alive again. They started to travel, quietly, without entourage or announcement. In spring, Kyoto in autumn. The sea in Jeju where no one recognized them. There, they rediscovered laughter. Once, standing on the shore, Woo Bin said softly, "I used to think surviving was enough. But it's not. Is it?" She looked at him, puzzled. "You have to learn how to live again," he continued. "And I think I'm still learning." She smiled and touched his hand. "We both are." There was something sacred in their ordinary days. She folded his coat before interviews. The way he brushed her hair back when she was tired. The way neither of them took a sunrise for granted anymore. Fame no longer defined them, love did. But love, as they knew too well, was not the gentle dream people imagined. It was a battlefield disguised as devotion. In private, Shin Min-ar still carried the weight of those years. Her friends noticed it, the pauses in her laughter, The way her gaze drifted into distance when someone mentioned illness. They called her strong. She hated the word. Strength, she had learned, was not a gift, it was a punishment life gave when you had no choice. Every time Wu Bin smiled, she smiled back, but behind it lingered the silent prayer that she'd never have to see that hospital again. When Wu Bin finally gave his first in-depth interview after recovery, the nation watched. Cameras lined up. Phones buzzed. Every outlet wanted the story, the miracle comeback, the triumph of will. He sat there, calm and poised, but his voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "I didn't think I would act again," he said. "There were nights when I couldn't even imagine waking up. But someone kept believing I would." Didn't need to say her name. Everyone knew. The interviewer asked if he feared returning to fame after so much suffering. Wu Bin smiled faintly. "Fame doesn't scare me anymore," he said. "Losing love does." The audience fell silent. That line spread across social media within hours, quoted, admired, worshipped. But to Shin, watching from home, it wasn't just a quote. It was the truth they had lived through. Later that year, they appeared together in public for the first time in years, not at an award show, not for a brand, but at a quiet charity event for cancer research. Cameras flashed wildly as they entered, hand in hand. Reporters shouted their names, begging for sound bites. But they only smiled politely, offering a few gentle words about hope and healing. There was no performance left in them, only authenticity. The photo of them walking through that hallway, his hand protecting hers, became iconic. Two survivors, radiant not because of fame, but because they had faced the unthinkable and emerged still holding on to each other. Even then, fame found a way to twist the narrative. Headlines called them Korea's strongest couple. Said they were unbreakable, immortalized by tragedy. But beneath the surface, they were just human, two souls who had stumbled through darkness and somehow found each other still breathing on the other side. At night, after the event, when the applause had faded and the lights had gone, together in bed, exhausted, Wu Bin rested his head on her shoulder. "They call us strong," he murmured. "But I've never felt more fragile." She kissed his forehead softly. "Maybe being fragile is what makes us human." Time softened the sharp edges of their story, turning pain into memory, fear into gratitude. And saw them now, they saw grace. Closest to them knew the truth. Survival doesn't erase the scars, it teaches you how to carry them. Every morning he woke up, Bin would touch his throat lightly, a quiet reminder of what he'd survived. Every night before sleeping, she would glance at him, as if to confirm he was still breathing. Love had become a constant act of vigilance. But neither resented it. It was their way of saying, "I'm still here." Years later, during a rare interview of her own, Min-ah was asked what love meant after everything. Paused for a long time before answering. "It's not about happiness," she said quietly. "It's about staying, even when happiness disappears." The room went silent. The journalist later described her expression as both luminous and unbearably sad. Perhaps that was what made her beautiful, the way sorrow had etched itself into her elegance. Their story had begun as a fairy tale, two stars, and adored. It became something else entirely, a story of endurance, of what love looks like when beauty fades and cameras stop rolling. In a world that worships perfection, became proof that imperfection is where truth lives. One evening, long after the frenzy had faded, they walked by the Han River. The air was cool, the city lights dancing across the water. He turned to her and said, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" She thought for a moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "And I think, if it hadn't, would we have learned how to really see each other?" He smiled, eyes soft. "Maybe pain was the only way we could learn love." He stood there in silence, watching the reflection of the city ripple and distort. Somewhere behind them, passerby recognized them and whispered their names. But they didn't turn. The world, once so loud, now seemed distant. All that mattered was this quiet, fragile, fleeting, real. When Kim Woo Bin fought cancer, mourned the possibility of losing an actor. What was truly at stake was far more intimate, the breaking and rebuilding of two hearts that had forgotten how to rest. He survived, yes, but survival is not the end of suffering, it's the beginning of understanding. Shin Min-ah's strength had shattered once, but in its place grew something more profound than strength, acceptance. In the end, Their story was not about illness or fame or even love. It was about life, raw, unpredictable, and breathtaking. The kind of life that strips you bare until all that's left is the truth, that even in the face of fear, two people can choose to hold on. Sometimes, that's enough. As the night deepened and the river shimmered under the soul lights, Wu Bin reached for her hand, intertwined her fingers with his, wordless, steady. The city pulsed around them, alive, different, eternal. But in that moment, time stopped. They had walked through pain, through loss, through silence. And somehow, against all odds, they were still here. Not as stars, not as symbols, just as two souls who had once broken, and learned how to live again. To everyone who has ever faced the quiet terror of illness, and to those who have stood beside them, unseen, uncelebrated, but unyielding, this story is for you. Kim Woo Bin and Shin Min-ah, though this piece is a work of reflection and tribute, its heartbeat belongs to the courage you both embodied in silence. Journey reminded the world that love is not the absence of pain, decision to stay through it. And to the readers, thank you for walking through the shadows and light of this story with an open heart. May it remind you that behind every smile is a battle we may never see, and behind every scar is a life still choosing to shine.